Hey there, my name is Anthony Romano, and in this video I'm going to tell you all about the new fasting technique that I personally think is going to take 2020 by storm. So this is something so ridiculously simple, like so simple, and it has a very high ceiling for the amount of fat loss it can bring you. So it's a very easy change. The only people who really know about it are the keto crowd, the low carb people, or those who are really into intermittent fasting, or prolonged fasting, but people don't really understand how powerful this tool is. So I'm going to explain to you all the benefits for fat loss and body composition, fitness, bodybuilding of fat fasting, because it's something that will make your routine, whether it's high carb, low carb, whatever, way easier. So what actually is fat fasting and how does it look? Basically, fat fasting is an intermittent fast combined with eating only fat to break that fast. Now you can do this in prolonged fasting, right? That's still technically fat fasting. And there are plans where you do this for multiple days and you only eat the fat, and there are other ways to manage that because you don't want to overdo too many calories. But this video is talking about intermittent fat fasting, okay? This is intermittent fat fasting, and if I ever do a video on prolonged fat fasting, that's a topic for a different day. Intermittent fat fasting is something that anybody could use on a similar level that they use intermittent fasting, right? Doesn't matter what you're eating. It's just about not eating, and then you stop not eating by eating fat. That is fat fasting as far as it applies to intermittent fasting. And there are slightly different benefits between the intermittent form and the prolonged form of fat fasting. You know, both will get you touching on the precipice of autophagy, which is the cellular cleansing process. Both will boost your growth hormone, both will amplify fat burning, get you closer to the keto state, which isn't necessary for you to do, but fasting in any form always works better with a keto metabolism because it puts you into one. Not many people know those are two of the exact same state. But fat fasting on an intermittent level. Somebody is fasting for 12 to 20 or so odd hours per day, and let's say they can only reach the 16th before they get very hungry. If you break that by eating only fat, essentially, you're not starting digestion in your stomach. Your stomach is doing the exact same thing it always does. It doesn't have to create any more enzymes. The fat will get digested in your large intestine when the bile starts to break it down and emulsify it. But it's not going to raise your blood sugar. It's not going to raise your insulin. These are very big points because when you eat protein or carb, but mostly carb, your insulin is going to go sky high. Protein is the second most insulinogenic source, and theoretically, you can get various fat burning boosting effects by eating only fat and protein, but that's not the point of this video. It's dramatically amplified when you eat only fat because fat has a very, very negligible and delayed insulin response. Very, very minimal. So basically, even though you're eating more calories that might kick you out of the fast, because fat takes so long to digest, doesn't add any more acid or create anything different in the setting of your digestion, your body almost doesn't process it right away. So you get these satiety boosting effects, right, which might indirectly make you lose more fat because you're not as hungry, but you also get to maintain the depth of fat burning via the fasted state because you're basically preserving it. So if you have to break a fast and you're on a timeline, right, you have a wedding or you have a show prep or a competition or something, and you really want to manage every last detail of your fat burning, start breaking those intermittent fasts with only fat because that will keep your insulin level low, which insulin isn't a problem, but an insulin spike in the morning will dictate the entire metabolic status of your body for that day. So if you don't have insulin in the morning, right, if you keep it stable and low as it would be from waking up after sleep because you didn't eat for 8 hours, hopefully 8 hours, basically, you're preserving that low level of insulin and blood sugar, which is signaling to your body, okay guys, we clearly aren't getting any more luxury fuel sources here, so let's keep breaking down the stores of fat. So if you eat only fat, that's going to preserve that fat burning state. And like I said, there are many other benefits of the fasted state. There's enhanced focus, in reducing oxidative stress, and cleaning out your cells, right? Autophagy, if you're unfamiliar with that. And it gets you deeper and deeper to starting to create ketones, which is byproducts of actually breaking down your own stored body fat, which is also beneficial because your brain can use those for fuel. But doesn't matter what your diet is, if you break the fast by eating only fat, you're going to stay in this state. So like I said, your stomach isn't breaking down protein, it's not breaking down carb. The fat is basically just passing through until it gets digested in the large intestine. And the main focus here is the lack of insulin, the lack of blood sugar rise, because you're basically tricking your body into thinking it's in the fasted state still. And, after a certain amount of time, your body will get the message, and, even though you're still eating low calories, right, or lower calories, perhaps because you're less hungry, or perhaps because you're doing like a plan where you're eating in a calorie deficit, either way, it's not only the calorie deficit that matters. So this is the next belief I want to break down in this video, because I've just explained how to do fat fasting. I've just explained what it's supposed to do. But I feel like a lot of people are watching this and, I can already hear people going to the comments, typing in, all that matters is your calorie expenditure, how much you burn and how much you end up with for the day. That's not the only factor here, okay? So listen carefully to this. And in fact, you could even write this down. Calorie expenditure is quantitative. Okay, write that down. What this means is that fat burning, although calorie deficit and calories intake is a primary driver of fat loss, it is a quantitative analysis of fat burn. And I say this plenty of times in my video, but it's the quantitative side. There's two sides to everything. There's a qualitative side to fat burn. And that qualitative side is managing and manipulating hormones in your body. So we have the quality and we have the quantity. Calories is an objective way to say, hey, you know what? As long as you get your calorie expenditure, so the amount in and out, to 2,000 a day, you're going to lose fat, right? That's the quantitative way. But it doesn't consider how much fat you're actually burning at individual parts of the day. And if I tell you, go run a half marathon, you instinctively know, okay, if I run a half marathon, I'm going to burn a lot of energy, right? People look at calories as the law of thermodynamics, but they're just looking at the whole outcome of the day. They're not looking at how much they're burning at each moment. And we know if you ran a half marathon, you'll be burning a lot more energy. And after a certain point, you'll be burning more fat. But we already walk a half marathon every day. Most people walk like 15 kilometers or whatever it is a day. And intensity is clearly a variable. This is something we instinctively know. We know there is this qualitative side of fat burning, and it goes hand in hand with quantitative. They're two primary drivers of fat loss. And although it's easier to just say the outcome-based one, the input-based one is harder to manage, but fat fasting is a great way to take advantage of that. So by minimizing your insulin levels and your insulin spike and blood sugar spike in the morning, in the daytime, or wherever you're fasting, which is better in the morning, which I'll talk about in other videos, what's happening is you're signaling to your body, okay, we don't have any fuel coming in, any luxury carb fuel coming in. We don't have any anabolic spike coming in. So let's stay in this breaking down phase and just keep breaking down fat. Basically, you're preserving the fat burning state. And when we're comparing this to the marathon example, right, it's like we said, you walk a half marathon every day, but we know there's a difference if you run a half marathon in terms of how much fat you burn. So this is basically the running equivalent for your metabolism. If you manage that insulin and keep that low throughout the day, you're basically making your body run a little faster. You're making the engine go a little faster. And essentially, even though, if you overdo your calories, you can still veto that, right? Because there's still the quantitative side that matters. You can get the best of both worlds if you simply, hit the quantitative measure in some way or shape or form, and also really take advantage and micromanage those qualitative moments of the day, right? So I think that was a good analogy there, at least the way I explained it there off the top of my head. But the quantitative analysis is the calories and the qualitative is the hormonal side. And I talk about this. There's something I talk about in other videos called insulin management. So, if you're doing the keto stuff, insulin management can be beneficial, of course, because you want insulin at certain times and you don't want it at highly fat burning times. But insulin management in terms of fat fasting is keeping your insulin stable and keeping fat burning going. So another thing people don't really know is that in the morning, right, which is where most people fast, they skip breakfast, if they're doing intermittent fasting, your cortisol will rise, right? Especially if you do more activity. Even just waking up requires cortisol to get you going. Cortisol will not break down your muscle tissue if insulin is not present. I talked about this in other videos, as I said, but cortisol will break down. The point of cortisol is to create emergency fuel, right? That's why it's called a glucocorticoid. It will create glucose and quick burning fuel from the stressor, right? But if insulin isn't present, the body is going to primarily tap into fat stores, and it's not going to try to break down your muscle to sacrifice, that quick burning fuel that it needs because it thinks a bear is chasing you, right? So the more stressors you take on in the daytime, right, the more fasted cardio you do, the more exercise you do while fasting, the more even just intensive focus-based activities you do in the daytime at the office or something. If you don't have an insulin spike present and you're maintaining that fat fast, your body is going to keep diving right into the fat stores. So there are other factors involved. So as I said, the quantitative side is the outcome based and the qualitative is the input based, okay? So if you manage both the point of this video is to manage both, okay? It's not to say, calories don't matter, because they do matter, but so does the qualitative side. And you want to manage the both and get the best of both worlds. The ironic thing is that the more you manage the qualitative, the more easy it will get to manage the quantitative, right? So the more you're fat fasting or doing things that regulate hunger hormones, the easier it will be to hit your calorie goals, right? So it's interesting that there's this dynamic between the two, but you can't just look at one in isolation. So the macros you eat and the timing of them does matter. So when we're talking about fat fasting, right? Even if you want to eat your carbs, eat them at the end of the day. If you have a show to hit or a vacation or a wedding or something where you need fast fat loss and you want to manage every moment of the day, micromanage every moment of that plan, you should start timing your macros. It's not so much just about hitting them, it's about the timing, because this affects how they impact your body individually. So that is the point of this video. I'm not going to talk about the autophagy. I'm not going to talk about getting closer to keto state. I'm not going to, these rules still apply for the ketogenic state, right? But it's simply that this is a tool that a lot of people can use. And it is so easy. You simply just eat fat for your first few meals of the day, but don't overdo it, okay? Because if you overdo too much fat, especially if your body is one that doesn't regularly consume large amounts of fat, it can upset your stomach, and that is not something you want to have. Keto people will have a better time eating large amounts of fat, but still, you shouldn't have large amounts of coconut oil, all these other things. They will severely upset your stomach and make you have to go to the bathroom for certain things, so just don't do it. You don't want to shit yourself. But that is for the people going crazy with quick burning fats like MCTs or other things. So the practical application, one last thing I want to touch on is that when we're talking about pure oils, right, like an MCT oil or grass-fed butter, my personal favorite way of doing fat fasting is bulletproof coffee, because I get the MCT oil for a ketone boost and mental function, but also because the butyric acid from grass-fed butter or ghee is very beneficial for your gut bacteria. It's also the first thing you eat in the day, goes exactly where you want it to go. But the people who want to actually eat something and get that satisfaction because they're craving it, right? It's not so common with the keto people because their blood sugar is much more stable and lower. But if you're somebody who, has carbs in place in your diet and you are hungry in the day, it's more likely that you'll want to eat something. So I recommend, if you're going to physically eat something to get that satisfaction, fit in, a handful of macadamia nuts or something, right? You can do almonds or something or other sort of nut or avocado, but keep in mind, a food like an almond will have more of a shell your stomach has to break down, right? It's not purely just a fat. Oils are technically pure fats. And, the phytic acid in the shell or other components of an almond, your stomach's gonna have to break them down. And, it might mess with the fasted state a little bit more than just a pure oil, because pure oil is just pure fat going right, not even getting touched until it goes to the large intestine. But, as long as you're preserving that low insulin state, as long as you're preserving primarily fat in a negligible amount of half a gram of, whatever carb is in the almond, right? Or indigestible fiber or something, right? These things are less of a concern, right? The point is, the general rule is eat only fat, because either way, you're going to be managing that insulin, you're going to be managing that blood sugar, and that is going to have macro effects on your other regulating hormones, like leptin, for example. So either way, if you're somebody who needs to eat an actual snack, that's my recommendation, like a handful of macadamias or some avocado or something that's just a pure fat source, because oftentimes, people who are hungry won't get satisfied from a tablespoon of MCT in their coffee or grass-fed butter in their coffee, but it will still have a better effect if you do that, and you will still feel very satiated and fulfilled from food, from oils. So that's the grand picture of fat fasting. It will actually have other benefits on reducing oxidative stress because it keeps your blood sugar low. There's a lot of other things that come into this. But trust me, this is the fat burning tool that will blow up in 2020, or at least I will be trying to make it blow up because it is so easy and approachable that no matter what you eat, if you simply get the fat that you would have ate in the day and have it for your first meal and have it in isolation, and you don't overdo it for practicality, right? Because you don't want to upset your stomach, that's a great way to get more out of the qualitative side of your fat burning. And then you'll truly get to experience the sense of, okay, so calories aren't the only thing that matter. These are two sides of the same coin, people. There you go. So leave me your questions. I will answer them. Thank you for the patience. Some of the videos, a lot of people ask me if I'm, still posting videos. I am. I was just working on a big collaboration project with Golden Era Bookworm again. And besides that, guys, like the video, okay? This is a big one, so share it with people because nobody really talks about this. People talk about intermittent fasting, but this is like a younger sister to intermittent fasting. But it does have its own benefits in and of itself because realistically, you can use them both in tandem, right, to extend a fast. I'll talk about prolonged fat fasting in another video. That's it for this one. Anthony Romano, peace.